4 people are sitting around a table talking about baseball, whatever you like. 5 minutes of it, very dull. Suddenly, a bomb goes off, blows the people to smithereens. What do the audience have? 10 seconds of shock. Now take the same scene and tell the audience there is a bomb under that table and will go off in 5 minutes. Well, the whole emotion of the audience is totally different because you've given them that information that in 5 minutes' time that bomb will go off. Now the conversation about baseball becomes very vital because they're saying to you, don't be ridiculous, stop talking about baseball, there's a bomb under there. You've got the audience working.
Three Films and a Podcast has no claim of ownership on any film footage used in this episode. All film footage is owned in its entirety by the copyright holders and is used solely with the intent of film criticism, commentary, and education under fair use law. And just like every car in Too Fast, Too Furious, this podcast contains spoilers. Enjoy.
Welcome back to Three Films and a podcast where three friends challenge each other to watch as many new movies as possible. We do a round format, very much like a book club. It's our movie club. You are invited to join this movie club. And this round in particular, we chose were Hitchcock films. So we each chose a Hitchcock film for all three of us to view, and we cover them on episodes here. Today we have joining us Josh Johnston. Josh, if you want to say hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Josh has been on with us before, so you can go back and look at our I believe it was the crime movies draft.
You're correct. If you're on YouTube, you can drop into the clubhouse and you can see Josh's questions answered there.
And we have, as always, Tyler out in Portland.
Hey, that's me. Hello, everyone.
Ben up in Salt Lake.
I was going to attempt the James Stewart impression. I just can't do it. Hello.
I was wondering who was going to be brave enough to try this episode.
Yeah, I can't do it. I should have been working on that.
Come on. There you go. There it is. There's James.
I want to do the whole podcast this way.
So before, I want to admit, I was embarrassed to say that. I was like, wait, is this Jimmy Stewart? Because it says James Stewart, you know? And I was just like, they're the same guy, right? Until I heard his
James
voice.
Jimmy's father?
Oh, okay. Or that's the guy. Anyways.
It's like when Larry Fishburne was Lawrence Fishburne.
Yeah, so it's like, wait, is it? I think that it's him, but I had to hear the voice.
Awesome. And of course I'm down here in Pleasant Grove, Utah.
Who are you? What's your name?
I am Matt.
And the power's on.
With a hard T. Not that half Utah silent T, but Matt. It's Matt.
All
down
caps.
by the mountains.
Yeah, I don't answer to Matt.
All caps.
So the reason I chose Vertigo out of all the movies that Hitchcock has in his filmography mainly had to do with the fact that I studied design in school, and I believe Saul Bass did a number of Hitchcock collaborations, but one of his more famous ones was the cover and opening credits to Vertigo. And we covered it. We went over it in school, going over some of Saul Bass' work, and I just hadn't seen Vertigo. And it also happens to be one of the more popular Hitchcock movies. I believe recently it's been going head to head with Citizen Kane as one of the most influential or best movies of all time. So there's a debate there around this movie that I found very intriguing. And so that's why I selected it. So I wanted to throw to Tyler just to give us a rundown of the movie and some details around Vertigo.
Okay, Vertigo. Man, where to start on this one? I'm really glad, we talk about it all the time. The whole reason we're doing this podcast is I feel like Vertigo is 100% a perfect example of why we're doing this and why I'm so happy to put our little club out there into the world. So hopefully some other people can have experiences like this, because, before we started recording, we were all chatting about how it turns out none of us have really seen any Hitchcock, despite having studied cinematography and filmmaking and all these things. We had all seen breakdowns of his techniques and his influence throughout film history and cinema. And so coming to the realization that this is the first Vertigo, or the first Hitchcock film I've seen front to back. I don't know. I couldn't be happier about it. When the movie was over, I was like, honestly kind of giddy. I was just like, this movie was so fucking good.
Mhm.
And what this movie is a 1958 film directed by, of course, Alfred Hitchcock. I can't imagine too many people haven't at least heard of the film and obviously know who Hitchcock is. But it's the story of a former police detective who just hit early retirement. Quite possibly, is this the beginning of the "I'm too old for this" trope, or the just
Kinda
retired
seems like
cop,
it, huh?
or the
Yeah.
guy that's 2 weeks away from
Martech.
retirement?
They pulled me in for one more job.
One
Yeah.
last time.
I just assume that Hitchcock started like everything in my naivete.
I mean, the way this movie went, yeah, for sure.
Like, there's so many things that this movie, and we'll talk about this later, the influence it's had in cinema.
Mhm.
But it follows a newly retired cop who gets hired by an old friend to surveil his wife, his being the old friend's wife. He's concerned about her. She's acting strange, and she wants our hero, which is a loose term in this film, Scotty Ferguson, played by none other than Jimmy fucking Stewart, who
That's how he would say it.
I know Jimmy James,
Old Jimbo.
as we call him here.
Jim, James, Jimothy.
I knew Big Tuna as America's grandpa almost, you know what I mean? Or like America's dad, right?
Yeah.
So just like, I in all honesty, I don't have a whole lot of exposure to James Stewart. So, I just pictured him as the aw shucks, gosh, like nice guy dad, right? And he has moments like this in here, but he floored me. And, I could drone on and on and on about just how much I love this movie.
Yeah.
But I was surprised to see in my research the sort of controversy around it, because it's now recognized or considered to be Hitchcock's masterpiece. But in its time, it was very hit or miss. The reviews were hit or miss for this thing.
Mhm.
And it actually left circulation for it was like 20 years or something like that, from
Yeah.
the late
Till- Yeah,
Resurgence
till
in the
84 or something.
80s.
Yeah. They re-released it. They restored it and released it in 1983, and it played at the Castro Theater in San Francisco. And
Mhm.
according to the IMDb trivia, it shattered every single record that the Castro Theater had as far as attendance and ticket sales. So, and now, like I said, it's widely regarded as one of his, if not his best film, which I'm glad I saw it. In my Letterboxd review, I wrote that I wasn't quite sure if this was the best one to start with, because I didn't know, honestly, that it had that reputation. I considered it, just from hearing people talk about Hitchcock, I considered movies like Psycho or The Bird,
Yeah.
whatever. I thought maybe those were his masterpieces, so to speak. So I don't know. It's just been a fun experience, and getting to, it's a good experience to get into Hitchcock. I don't know if it was the right one to see first. Maybe I peaked. We're gonna find out. We've got a couple more Hitchcock movies coming up, but I'm glad that you picked it, Matt, and I'm sure we'll talk about this too, but Saul Bass holds a special place in our hearts here at Three Films and a Podcast.
Yes.
Has had some influence on the direction here, and I don't know, I'm just super excited, and I'll stop rambling here, but I'm just glad we're doing Hitchcock, guys. Like,
Yeah.
it feels good to actually kind of get into it. And Ben, I'm curious, like, what you have to say about, because I haven't seen any Hitchcock, and
Mhm.
so how does this fit in with the rest of his
I mean,
filmography?
I feel like it's seen as a favorite among Hitchcock. Like if you go to IMDb, it's in his 4 that he's known for. I've seen some Hitchcock. I'm familiar with it. Familiar with his work. I think Psycho is still my favorite just because like it really kind of put some storytelling tropes on their head, which is always really cool. And I think that's what Citizen Kane did as well. Citizen Kane set the bar for a lot of things, which is why it held that spot forever for the, sound and sight top film. And then, 2012 Vertigo took over, and it was kind of a big deal for people who cared about this stuff. It's like, wait, Citizen Kane got dethroned? That's crazy. But I think Vertigo is a solid choice. If you're going to put it up there against something, it is Vertigo because I mean, Hitchcock was in his prime at this point. I mean, we had a 3-year run where this was in 1958. He did Vertigo. 1959, we get North by Northwest, which we're going to watch. And then in 1960, we got Psycho. So 3 years in a row, he released arguably his 3 best movies. And that's crazy, especially nowadays. People aren't putting out movies every year. You're waiting 4 years for the next Nolan or 5 years for the next Tarantino, or whenever Terrence Malick decides to work again. It's like you have these people that are just like taking forever, but Hitchcock's just like, cool, we're going to do these 3 in 3 years. I think what sets this movie apart and why, one of the reasons that it took over on the sound and sight is so much stuff was created for this. Like, the biggest one, I believe, being the dolly zoom, which we see a lot because the cinematographer wanted to come up with a way to try to show what Vertigo is like for people. I guess Hitchcock had the idea back when he worked on Rebecca, but he couldn't figure out how to do it. For those who aren't familiar, it's essentially you have the camera on a dolly, and as you're pushing forward towards the subject, you switch the lens so it goes to a wider angle. So while you're getting closer, you're also showing more of what's around it, or vice versa. You go away from it while you're zooming in on the subject. I think one of the most famous uses of it is in Jaws, when everyone's seeing the shark, and we just get that dolly into I forget his name now, but I think it's one of the most famous uses of it. But this movie, this is the first time that we see it. And that's huge. It's been used in movies nonstop. Spielberg uses it quite a bit. Hitchcock uses it, more in his movies as well. So I just think we were at prime Hitchcock. He knows how to use a location. Like, there is no question you're in San Francisco during all this. He had a great relationship with Jimmy Stewart at that time because we had done Rear Window. We had done The Man Who Knew Too Much. And then this is the last time they worked together, I believe. So, I mean, really, he's just like, he's throwing heaters nonstop. And so it makes sense. Like, I'm more surprised that this flopped when it came out. It's like, as we were watching this, like, man, what it wouldn't have been like to be alive in the 50s when like waiting for the next Hitchcock
ready.
movie,
Dude,
like,
people
this
weren't
would be
ready.
great. Yeah. And like we talked about, like, maybe they just weren't ready, and then it came back out and people could recognize it for the greatness that it was. So
sometimes being too early is worse than being too late or
100%.
being wrong. I'm curious. I just thought of this now. I wonder what, if any, movies, contemporary films that are coming out now may be looked at retrospectively in the same way that we are with Hitchcock. I don't know how to answer that question, but I'm just curious. Like, if you guys can think of anything, by all means. But
I mean, the one example I just want to throw out real quick, I'm curious to hear Josh's thoughts on this, but the first thing that came to my head is Zodiac. I think people like when they talk about the best Fincher movies, I don't know that comes up too much. Like, you get Fight Club, you get Seven, you get Social Network, all wonderful, wonderful films. Yeah. But like Zodiac is amazing. Also in San Francisco, Zodiac. It's like, it's a great, great movie. If you haven't seen it, I recommend it. Like, I think that's one that when you look back on, you're like, oh wow, that was actually fantastic, but we just get caught up in the Brad Pitt and all that, which is understandable. I've been there, but once I finally got around, we've all been there. But once you get around to like watching Zodiac, it's like, oh, this is a great movie. Josh, I'm curious, like, what comes to your mind for that?
So I think a lot of the strengths of Vertigo has a lot to do with the themes and the emotions that the visual pieces that he puts in there evokes, like his use of color and the vertigo effect. I think that's the strengths of it. So I think it's in good company with some of these other psychological thrillers that came out later, maybe not even thrillers, but just things that play on you psychologically with the use of the visual and the sound. And they kind of leave the story aside. Like that's the main part of the film that you're watching.
Mhm.
Yeah, I saw a quote from someone that was like almost in the same way with the Apu trilogy, where like Hitchcock really couldn't have cared about the story less. Like the story, the I can't remember who said it, might have been Scorsese, but that it was like the plot was just something to hang the rest of the movie on.
Mhm.
And like the real story is being told with the camera and the lights and the colors and all that stuff.
I can't really say that I believe the plot, and I don't take any of the story seriously. I mean, as a realistic story. So the plot is just a line that you can hang things on. And the things that he hangs on, they're all aspects of, cinema poetry.
And so, yeah, I think you're spot on, Josh. It's like, I think, when this movie came out, it was sort of like the death of the golden age of like, of Hollywood or the first golden age of, I don't know what you would call it, but, like the Cary Grants and all that.
Yeah.
So it was like, it was less about like the story, and the camera wasn't just something that was sitting somewhere. It was like the camera was the character in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I also, I heard, and I don't know if this is true or not, but when Hitchcock was starting, he was talking about how he didn't really like that the talkies were coming in. He wanted, he was all about the visual. He was all about that more than the dialogue and putting the play on a movie. So I think that fits in with this movie as well. There's not very much dialogue in this movie to begin with. It's a lot of like Jimmy Stewart following Kim Novak everywhere through San Francisco, which is awesome. But at the same time, you're like, dude, you're way too close with that car, man. She's gonna spot you. But of course,
that's one of my biggest pet peeves.
You start following right after she left.
So you're like, in some ways, you're looking at it and you're like, dude, I don't trust Jimmy. I do not trust your judgment. First, you couldn't jump. Like you can't Batman from one building to the other building. I don't trust you there. Your partner tried to save you. He died. So, I mean, I really don't trust your judgment, and he's super close. But of course, we find out, spoilers, that Kim Novak knows that he's following her.
Yeah.
So,
that does change things for sure. But yeah, watching it happen live, I'm like,
I'll do it live.
Come on. He's in this goddamn graveyard. You're being followed. And so it makes me wonder, like, and I actually talked about this with Alex, like, do you guys think if someone was following like that, you would know? Like,
the cars are huge. The cars are huge at that time too.
Yeah, but I mean, if every car is huge, then they don't really stick out. But
good point.
It's just like, I don't know. It's one of my biggest pet peeves in movies, and so like, at the end we find out, of course, that she knew he was following, but at the moment you're like, come on, like Hitchcock, you're like, everything about this is incredible. So I don't know. That's just.
It also played to one of my biggest pet peeves, which is somehow in a big city, there's always parking in front of the building you're going to. It's like, what is going? Like, I understand San Francisco wasn't as busy as it is now, but like that whole street in front of his house, like I've never driven down those streets when there's just like a car in every single spot. So like, and he's just like, oh, I'm going to take up 3 spots while she goes and drops this letter in my mailbox. I'm like, no, are you kidding me? Like that wouldn't happen. But
you get towed immediately.
Don't down that alley too. But, like, it's like, dude, you can't U-turn back down this alley. One way in, one way out.
But I liked your point as far as like with the talkies coming in, because Hitchcock started with silent film. So I think he's always been good at using the visuals to tell the story. I don't think he's much of an exposition person, which is great. And there's one example that really stuck out to me for some reason, but it's after he saves her in the bay and we start out on the shot of him in his apartment and we kind of have that like panning tracking shot through his apartment to his bedroom where she is, and we just like see through the doorway of his kitchen, and we see her outfit and everything there drying out, and it's like, man, this is such a good way just to let people know, like, cool, she's here, like he has like undressed her to take care of her, like not in any nefarious way or anything like that, but it's like we've established what's going on. We're probably about to see her in the bedroom, but you know, I think a lesser filmmaker would have just like done a cut, like, oh, we're going to cut to the kitchen, we're going to establish like, oh, like her clothes are all here and now we're going to go. But the way he shows, it's like, no, we're just gonna do a slow panning shot to the bedroom, and whatever you see along the way, like just take that information in. And I think he's really good about that. There's one thing that he really attributed, or people have attributed his filmmaking to, which is called the Kuleshov effect, which is like you show somebody an image or something happening, and then you show their reaction face, the reaction to it. But it's how we interpret the person's reaction based on what they just saw.
Now we have a close-up, then we show what he sees. Now we cut back, and he smiles. Now what is he as a character? He's a kindly man. Now we'll put in a piece of film of a girl in a bikini. What is he now? The dirty old man. That's what film can do for you.
So if you see a kid with like a popped balloon and someone's just kind of looking at it, it's like, oh, they look sad. But then you see the kid with the balloon inflated and it's the same shot of the person. It's like, oh yeah, they're happy that the kid has a balloon, but it's the same exact thing. And I think Hitchcock does that a lot to like inflect like the emotion that we're supposed to be feeling on what happens. And that's just why he's the master of suspense and just like one of the best filmmakers of all time. And in my opinion, probably the person that deserved an Oscar that never got one.
Yeah,
that's it's
great.
amazing to me that he never
Oscar.
got an Oscar.
Wow.
I think he may have gotten like a lifetime one, but like he never won an Oscar for any of his films, which is just
like
insane to me.
Scorsese in that, so it joins good company again.
Sure.
It's true. Yeah, yeah.
Well, I wanted to, I guess, to add, I guess my experience turned this on. First of all, like the second I fired this up on the TV, it was like, I wish we were doing like 10 Hitchcock movies
Right.
and not just 3. You know, it's like, man, we need to blaze through this filmography.
Yeah.
Just because there's so much of, like, he does so much with sound and visuals that it really does like set him apart. Like that can't be understated. Like I was paying attention to like, you're following this green car throughout the whole movie. And just the idea that that someone's storytelling in the 50s is like using those devices to make it easier for the audience to follow what's going on.
Right.
And even later on, when he's following, you know, the Judy, who's decked out in green as well. You know, there's these cues that, you know, they're providing for the audience to tell, you know, a great story visually. And then, as Josh pointed out, like there's not a lot of dialogue in this, and it's just amazing how enjoyable a movie can be with just sound cues. Yeah. And like face acting, and like just such a cool display of that. And so to me, like as I was pondering like why Vertigo is like a standout among his filmography, like it makes complete sense.
Yeah.
I wanted to call back into mentioning Saul Bass. Josh, you're an artist as well. Saul Bass has done a lot of work in the film industry. For those who aren't familiar with Saul Bass, probably the most iconic thing that you know that Saul Bass did is the AT&T logo. But he worked.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
He worked. He also did
Sell Out.
Yeah. I think Bell Systems, whatever they're called now. It's another icon.
Yeah.
You'd recognize the logo.
Yeah.
But he's also done like tons of opening and closing credits, the animation for that, the design for it. He's done, you know, several movie posters and covers. Vertigo is one of the most popular. But Josh, I wanted to know, I guess, first, maybe your feelings on Saul Bass, or your favorite movie posters of his, or just movie posters in general that you want to talk about. What is this? Where does this road of art and film cross for you?
With Vertigo specifically, I mean, like I said, the emotions that he evokes with the palette that he's using is amazing. If I read correctly, I think he did, like, in this movie is the first computer animation ever to film.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I read that. That's
so
crazy.
I mean,
Cool.
I'm not extremely familiar with Saul Bass. I like you said, like there's these iconic things that he's done, and it. I mean, when you see it, you're like, oh yeah, I know that. So I mean that the use of all of these pieces in the art of the movie and the opening, the dream sequence.
That dream sequence, like, talk about things that have been ripped off. I don't know if we've seen something like that before, but just knowing this is the first movie that made use of computer animations. Like, I don't know when Fantasia came out in reference to like when Hitchcock came out, but just that psychedelic dream sequence, I was like, holy shit, I've seen that in so many movies. And I don't know if this was the inception of it, but it really took me by surprise. Like, to be honest, I thought we were getting a black and white movie when I turned this on. I don't know why I thought that. So, and then, the title sequence starts out with that red and it's monotone, sort of like a black and white. But anyways, just the fact that it was in color and his use of color and everything surprised me in this movie, including that dream sequence.
Yeah, even like the spirals and shapes, like it's like it keeps going back to the spiral in her hair, and you see the spiral right in the beginning. It's like he's going down this downward spiral. Like that's all I could think of when I'm watching that is it's like things are getting really fucked up for him throughout. Like it just increasingly and increasingly is just getting worse.
Right.
And and I think that like one movie that does that really, really well that freaks me out and I can't really watch it anymore is Requiem for a Dream. Like it's a downward spiral.
Sure.
It just gets worse for everyone in the movie.
I've put that one on the shelf.
Yeah, it's hard to watch, man.
It's a young man's movie, I think.
Like the use of color, the same deals. The use of color and those devices that Hitchcock uses with Saul Bass is really cool. So I don't know. The poster's amazing too. Like I dig that poster.
We should try and do. I know this is on the fly and none of us are prepared for it, but I think it would be cool since there's 4 of us to do a quick Rushmore for movie posters. Each one of us will pick one. And so from this episode, maybe we don't have to do it right now. Maybe we can just put it in the back of our minds and pull up a Google search like I did. But I think that'd be cool if we could put 4 posters together, like our Rushmore as a collective.
One that I know will make mine that I wanted to bring up, side tangent quickly, is I think Hitchcock does a good job of setting the tone for his movies with his posters. And I feel like we get that a lot with Tarantino as well. Obviously, Pulp Fiction is just like a notorious poster, but I think it kind of lets you know to some extent what you're getting into, but he's really good at like evoking emotion. One that I know will make my Rushmore for sure, movie aside, one of the best posters I think in existence is for episode 1, The Phantom Menace, when we have young Anakin and the shadow is Darth Vader on the house. Like that's just one of the coolest ideas ever. I think, like maybe I'm just a simpleton, but I'm like, man, that's pretty rad to like put those 2 things together in a poster. Obviously the poster maybe outshone the movie, but it's like it was so cool. I thought it was just such a great idea. Like that's one of my favorite things. I have way too many posters in my house. I don't have enough walls, because I love like the art that's derived from it. The ones I have in my room here with me I have like one for Jaws, but it's like made up to look like a topographical map of like the bay that it's in. One from Parasite, which like just shows all the different class structures. Then my favorite one it's Ferris Bueller, but it's like they've done it in the style of like the painting that Cameron is looking at in the museum. So it's like it's all them, but inside that poster is like, oh man, that's super rad. I need to have that. So like I love that kind of artwork. That's all like unofficial, just like fan artwork. But as far as official posters go, I love that Phantom Menace poster so much.
Yeah, that's rad. I like so when Matt, when you put this prompt into our little doc that we share, I couldn't think of any. So now I'm having to go through here, but I find all of my favorites are the simple ones. Like a good example is Ghostbusters. It's just the ghost with the circle around it. Like a lot of the ones that are trying to do too much, or a lot of them are pretty simple. It just has a picture of the characters or whatever. But another one that I really like that sort of gets lost because now in the digital age, we don't really see movie posters that much. Like, yeah, especially now the last year, we haven't been able to go to the movie theaters.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
Parasite, the poster for that one
Mhm.
is just like a really cool piece of art on its own.
So good.
So I couldn't really think of too many, but I've got a bunch that I'm looking at here. But I want to know, Matt, like, what are some of your favorite posters? I want to check out some of those.
Well, my answer is not going to be as I mean, it was just similarly, it was a genuine question I had. The reason I thought of it was because I had the VHS of Vertigo in my house growing up, and it's maybe the one movie cover that I remember. Like
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
it stands out from a lot of other movies, and a part of that is because the easy thing to do when a movie comes out is just get your cast shots, put all their heads together, and there's your movie poster.
For
And
sure.
so
Right.
there's not very much zagging in the industry. And so
Right.
when there is one that's like a little more different, a little more compelling, which again, Hitchcock has, very different movie posters, for his work. So I thought it was noteworthy that, Saul Bass does some of the ones that are like pretty different. Like
Mhm.
he did the poster for The Shining as well.
Yeah.
which
nice.
is pretty interesting. And so it similarly, like when we were going over like opening credit animation in one of my animation courses, they were talking about how important the opening credits are to like setting the tone for a movie, and
Yeah.
they're usually it's communicating more than you think it is, subtly. And I think Saul Bass particularly does that with his posters. He's everything's very deliberate.
Yeah.
Way more deliberate than just throwing faces on a poster, which obviously sells tickets because that's why everybody does it.
Right.
But I really like Vertigo was probably my go-to, and I'm a Star Wars guy, so I really like the original Star Wars poster.
Yeah, me too.
Mhm.
Kind of in that really ultra heroic pose of Luke with his chest born and like abs and everything.
Yeah.
And the lightsaber's
Doesn't
going
appear in the
up and
movie.
it's like doing that cross in the sky.
Yeah.
So there's like a lot of symbolism with that too. Like this is our savior right here,
Mhm.
Oh yeah, I never thought about that.
There's some good symbolism there. And then I liked sort of the poster played homage to it with Rian Johnson's The Last Jedi, with Rey there in the
Mhm.
middle holding a lightsaber up, and kind of Luke and Kylo Ren there in red. And so that's easy for me as a Star Wars fan to gravitate towards those, but those would be some of my choices.
Rad.
I also recently liked the Moonlight poster.
That's
Where
a
you
really
feel
good
the
one.
three phases of the actor. They did
Yeah.
a great job with that. What about you, Josh? Do you have any favorites that come to mind?
Same as Matt, like the Star Wars posters, the ones specifically that are painted.
Yeah.
Like those are really amazing to me. I really like those simplistic, intricate ones, like the like the Vertigo one. Are you guys familiar with the Mean Streets poster? Kind of looks like Art Deco. It's just like a gun in the middle of a city and stuff like that.
I don't know. I think I need to see it.
That one's one of my favorites. And I don't know who designed that one. But I mean, the Reservoir Dogs, not all the posters, but some of the posters, is just, you just see the little sketch painting of, four guys joined together in ties.
Yeah.
So it like draws you in.
Yeah, and maybe, now that I'm thinking about this, because at first I was like, why doesn't every movie come up with like a cool piece of art to be its cover? But maybe not every movie needs that. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like I'm looking at like Titanic or something, like, or even Shawshank Redemption. Those are both great movies, but like, I don't know if those movies, not that they don't deserve it, but do they need like some movies feel, not that they're not artistic, the Shawshank Redemption or the Titanic, but some movies feel more artistic than others, like Parasite, like something I named, or the movie we're talking about, what is it, Vertigo, like it's those, in my opinion, seem like they lend themselves to like the cover being a piece of art in and of itself. But then again, like, I mentioned Ghostbusters is a cool cover, and it's not, that movie's not artistic per se. I don't know. I'm just trying to just work it out in my own head here live for everyone to listen to. Like, why, just like it seems like a wasted opportunity to not create a cool piece of art to go along with your cool piece of art.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think that's what sort of makes, I know Ben like collects these Criterion or these collectors like DVD sets. I think one of the draws to that is sort of like the original art that comes along with that.
100%. Oh yeah. Yeah. Without a doubt. I think that's just one of the things they put all their passion into, is making sure that the cover art is reflective of the movie. I think that's why I love posters and all that stuff so much. I think it's great.
Awesome. So for those of you who have not watched a Hitchcock movie, or maybe have a limited exposure to, like Tyler, for those of you like Tyler,
first of all, I'm sorry if you're like me at all. I apologize. Maybe we can get a group rate on a counselor or something.
Yeah.
This is it. You're talking it out right now.
It's free here on the pod. Great.
For those of you like Tyler who have limited access or limited experience with Hitchcock, I wanted to sort of open the floor to, if you're going to dive into this and look into Vertigo right now, or any of the other Hitchcock that we're covering.
Yeah.
I wanted to open the floor to give maybe some insight as to what you could look for, as to what makes Hitchcock movies stand out amongst, other movies, other thrillers, mysteries, why he's so influential, what you could be looking for next time you're sitting down watching one. And I wanted to throw to Ben to sort of start us through that.
I mean, first things first, you're probably going to have a blonde leading lady. He really liked his blondes. Yeah. So that's the first thing you're going to get. But I mean, Hitchcock really was, I think there's so many times you can go back and watch an older movie and you're almost desensitized because of the stuff we've seen now. It's like, oh yeah, I've seen this done before. It's like, yeah, but back then is when they did it first. Mm-hmm. I think Hitchcock still holds up, because that's the stuff he was creating back then. I mean, he was dubbed the master of suspense, and for, a good reason. Like, he was one of the first people. He would like kind of show you the bomb that was under the chair of somebody without them knowing about it. And so you would know how much time was left, and the clock is ticking away while these people are just like slowly coming up the stairs or whatever. It's like, it's the Scream trope of like, don't say you'll be right back, like that kind of a thing. It's just like,
never, ever, ever, under any circumstances, say, I'll be right back. Because you won't be back. I'm getting another beer. You want one? Yeah, sure. I'll be right back.
Oh, now there's a bomb there and he's going to walk up. But back then it was just like, he's really good at building the suspense. He's like great with the tension. One of his best movies, I believe, is Rope, which was kind of done to show that it was all in one take, which it wasn't, but two guys have a dead body in the apartment, but they're also hosting a dinner party. So it's this tension of them like constantly trying to like make sure people aren't around it, he's really, really good at that stuff. And he's great at long takes. And I think camera movement is one of the best things that he does. Like he's a master of cinematography. Recently watched Rebecca, and it's just amazing when you watch the behind the scenes from a movie back then in the 40s and what they did with like the matte paintings, which they did in Vertigo too. Like that whole tower is a matte painting because it had been destructed in between him scouting out locations and then them actually filming. So like the tower isn't there, it's just like a matte painting, but I think he does a great job with that. And one of the biggest things he did is he popularized the MacGuffin. One of his writers had actually like come up with the phrase, but he kind of, was seen as like the father of it. And essentially it's the best example, I believe, of a MacGuffin is the briefcase in Pulp Fiction. Like you don't actually know what's in it, like what they're going after, but that's the focus of the movie. And so that's kind of what the MacGuffin is, just like what is the thing that the characters are after, whether or not it's actually important to the story or not. We just need to know like what their drive is, and that's a MacGuffin. So he's really, really good at that. I don't know. I really enjoyed Vertigo. I think we got to see him tapping into some of his like his best skills, you know, like establishing our characters really early on, like with the step ladder thing, you know, and he's like, oh, I can stand on this. And that's so important in filmmaking, because then later on when we call back to it, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that's why we saw that earlier. And Hitchcock, I mean, he was a master at his craft, like 100%. I think sometimes genius gets thrown around a little too loosely, but I, without hesitation, would apply that to him when it comes to filmmaking. Josh, what are your thoughts? Like, if people are asking you about Hitchcock, what would you tell them about Hitchcock to look out for?
I don't know. We're talking a lot about Vertigo and how great it is, but I'm not totally convinced that people would latch onto it that easily. I feel like other movies might be easier for them to kind of connect to.
For sure.
You know, like North by Northwest, like that moves along pretty well. Like, you know, same thing. Like it has holes, but it's engaging you so much visually that you don't give a damn. Like you kind of dismiss it, but he's not unique in that. Every filmmaker does that.
For sure.
So, I mean, I would say, you know, the most famous ones that are probably the ones to look to is, you know, like North by Northwest. You got to look at Psycho. And then maybe after that get to Vertigo, because Vertigo, like it is asking you to kind of suspend some. I mean, it's a movie about very insecure people, is what I look at it as. Like, and it's and you like see that it's like Jimmy Stewart can't, like he's not with Midge anymore. Like, I think that's supposedly his ex-wife or something, like, or his ex-fiance. And it's only like after like he saves Kim Novak out of the bay, like that, like you start to see him like come alive, you know. But before that, he's just like some, you know, some cop that was probably forced into retirement because he wasn't very good at his job. But I mean, like, I like that he doesn't like, you just don't trust his instincts at all. Like you're going through, like, you know, more than he does throughout. But like the thing that Hitchcock's really good at too is giving you the payoff. It's all about the payoff, I feel like, and he never fails in that. I feel like in the movies that I've seen. I'm not familiar with his entire library, but it's a big library. So
it is. Yeah, because like it's funny that you say like you're not sure if he's a good detective, which is true watching it, but towards the end, I guess we could try to keep some spoilers out of this for people that may not have seen it, but we learned that he actually is a good detective, and he actually was, despite his breach of ethics in falling in love with his, you know, the person he's supposed to
wife.
Yeah. You know, his instincts were right, and it turns out that he did crack the case, and it took him a roundabout way to do it. But yeah, I think this movie, not unlike a lot of other films, especially movies, you know, from, you know, the olden days, for lack of a better term, they ask you to believe in the fact that these characters fell in love over the span of like 2 days. Like the level of obsession and like, I was actually kind of surprised. I'm like, oh wait, they're supposed to be in love. Like I never saw, I can see where he might be infatuated with her, and he may have like created something in his own head, falling in love with her, but her reciprocation of that love to him, I'm just like, I'm not quite buying it. But the rest of the movie is so well crafted and cool, and the story is like trying to figure out where the hell this is all going is interesting enough that you're willing to, or I was willing to let that go. But you're right. It's like, it does ask you to make some pretty big leaps in logic and look away from a few.
Because the ride is so interesting, I feel like it's easy to just kind of dismiss some of those holes.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like what we were talking about, like the plot literally didn't matter to Hitchcock. Like he was telling his story the way he wanted to tell it, and the things that happened were just it just what didn't matter to him. It was like the way that they happened, not the fact that they happened, or the way it was shown to us anyways.
Exactly. Yeah. I was gonna say, I think it's the pro and con of Hitchcock. Like, he's very good at having like a simple plot line straightforward, but like at the beginning of this movie, if it's going slow, you have nothing to divert with. Like, you don't have the second layer of Inception to dig into or anything like that. It's like, okay, well, this is the storyline and we're just following it. There's nothing else going on. But, you know, when it's a story that is like really just moving the whole time, like North by Northwest or like Psycho or anything like that, like Rope, something like that, like you're in it the whole time because you know what the one thing that this movie is about and you're focused on it. And I think it works in Vertigo. I think it just, you know, it kind of helps if you understand Hitchcock, or you just need to be along for the ride, basically. And I think it was wonderful.
Yeah, for sure. Not a bad ride to take.
True.
Oh, it's great. Josh, did you had a talking point on here? Did you want to pose that to the gang?
So we kind of already touched on it a little bit, but you know, like Vertigo, it's been said to be by many that, you know, it is the psychological thriller. It's the one that has kind of been a jumping point for a lot of psychological thrillers that came afterward. And Guillermo del Toro does like this interview where he's talking about a lot of his work. He used to do a lot of talks about Hitchcock and how easy it is to kind of absorb his work. But he called this pure cinema. But like I said, when it was released, you know, it was deemed a flop. Like when we talked about it, and then only in the 80s it kind of came back. And I guess I have the answer. You know, like, we all really enjoy this movie, but I mean, does it really work for you guys? Like the movie as a whole? Why or why not? You know?
Yeah, I mean, it couldn't have worked more for me.
I mean,
short, simple answer.
We all professing our love for it, so I mean, I know it works for us, but I mean, it does have holes. But this movie is not alone in having holes, and I think, to me, it's just, it depends on how well you do it, and Hitchcock was really good at it. So you can have all the holes in the world if you can make it really interesting to people. And you know, the MacGuffin thing, like, the most famous MacGuffin now, I think, is the gauntlet in Avengers for Thanos, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
that's a good point.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're asking a lot of people to, you know, suspend their belief.
Yeah. What about you, Matt? Like, did this work for you? I know, you know, for the three of us, it was a first timer, and you said you kind of grew up around it, but how did it work on your first, like, sit down watch?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting about, I guess, this exercise that we're doing with the podcast is we're looking at movies, and I think even movies that are maybe rated poorly that we experience, we're trying to look at objectively to find what's good about it, and also be able to talk about, you know, what everyone hated about it. With Vertigo, you know, that's a different story, because at this point in time, it's like lauded as a very, you know, very favorably critically. And so part of it's just like trying to recognize what that is. But I think we touched on, I think, why it works today, and why, you know, it should have worked back when it came out, is just like how masterfully it tells a story across all channels of filmmaking. And so it really is just like it's a piece of work that, you know, is exceptional from like a sound design standpoint, visual design standpoint, you know, script and pacing. Like, if you want to like dissect why movies work for people and like why people enjoy things a certain way, like, so much of that stuff to a general audience, they don't know why they're enjoying it. You need to teach them and explain, like, this is why, like, people don't have patience for this. People, you know, don't like to be tricked like this or whatever. And I feel like this hits on all the right beats, and like so many of the things that it does, even in 1958, was it 1958?
Yeah.
Even in 1958 are things that are like filmmakers are still doing today. And that's why I feel like it was easy, you know, to watch this, and you're seeing a lot of the same stuff, even though you're not recognizing that like, oh yeah, this is a technique that, you know, Rian Johnson uses. But so for me, it worked. It worked because now time has given it, you know, sort of the respect that it deserves. Maybe when it came out, maybe it was the subject matter or just like the fact that it was a little trippy. Maybe it was hard on audiences.
The computer animation, maybe.
Computer animation. And so time has allowed it to be looked at, you know, through a more, I guess, filmmaking, a critical filmmaking standpoint, microscope.
For sure. It worked like perfectly for me as well. The only thing I was thinking about while watching it was the same question I had with the Before trilogy, which is, does this work in a different city? Because I feel like the scenic views that we got and all these places that we got to go to, and we are all like established San Francisco lovers on this pod. Yeah. So like it was amazing. But I just thought about the town I grew up in, which is like 40 miles north of San Francisco, and it doesn't have the big buildings like this. Like, would it have been as interesting still? You know, like the chase, you know, whatever. I was following her going down the hills and things like that. The, you know, being underneath the Golden Gate Bridge when she jumps in the water. Like, does this work if it's just like a lake in a town? I don't know how much of it is attributed to San Francisco. I think it's wonderful. Like, I love the movie. I think it was really good, but that was the only thought I had. Like, I wonder how much of this like burden or how much of like the weight of this movie San Francisco is holding on its shoulders if it was based somewhere else. But I think all the acting was great. I loved all of it. Like it was a really good watch. I thought I had seen it before and I hadn't. I had just seen so many clips from it. So that was super fun to like actually sit down and watch it for the first time. But that was honestly like my big critical takeaway, which was like, I wonder how much of this is San Francisco that I love about this movie. But I still think it was great.
Yeah, I think San Francisco definitely like is a character in this movie, but yeah, I'm not so sure like Kim Novak jumping in the Great Salt Lake would really be like, she's fine. Like, she smells like brine shrimp now. She's all right.
Yeah.
Now that I'm thinking about it, it's actually almost kind of weird that he stayed in the big city given his fear of heights. Like, it's almost weird to me that like it didn't start in San Francisco and end up in like, I don't know, somewhere in Iowa where there's no buildings over 2 stories, you know,
down the hill or something. Like how the hell is it?
Or yeah, like even if he just moved 40 miles north to the town you grew up in, right?
Exactly.
Like, it's just I didn't really think about that, but I'm really glad he didn't because San Francisco looked fucking awesome.
It was beautiful.
I loved, you know, every opportunity they had, they kept the windows open so you can see the city from their high-rise apartments that he's so terrified of.
That's cool.
And yeah, how they constantly, you know, had the bridges in the background. And apparently when that chase scene you mentioned, that's geographically correct. I didn't know. According to IMDb trivia, you can actually follow that exact route. They made sure to have it be the actual route to get to
that's awesome.
Fort
Dude,
Point.
We should make a field trip, guys, and go do it.
We should.
Let's do it.
I've been there. I actually watched a guy. There's a for those of you that are surfers out there, there's a famous wave break there that people surf. And I watched a guy surfing. There was a seal like surfing on the same wave as him. There was a seal playing in the waves right there. It was pretty cool.
That's rad.
It's a gorgeous city, man. I love
San Francisco is awesome.
Speaking of San Francisco and seals, when we just went out there in October 2019, we took some water bikes out on the bay. This was super awesome. You were like right around one of the carriers that's, or not a carrier, just a destroyer that's out there in the bay. Yeah. And a seal just came up right next to us just to hang out. It was just like,
that's awesome.
Right there in the bay. Yeah. It was super
That's
cool.
rad.
All right. Well, that concludes our episode on Vertigo. As you just heard, we could not recommend this movie more. We're excited to jump into more Hitchcock. We hope that you come along with us. Please give us a follow on Instagram, Spotify. Check us out on YouTube, wherever you can find us. Give us a follow. Give us a review on Apple Podcasts. We have a Patreon that you could follow and contribute to, which we appreciate greatly.
They have awesome shirts.
And we have awesome shirts.
Yeah, we do.
Josh has got one. Exclusive movie
awesome
club
mugs
t-shirt
too
for Josh.
That's right. We have a shop. So check us out. We appreciate any contribution that you make. But thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks for having me back, guys.
Thanks.
man has been married about 2 or 3 times, that's because he meets a different woman every film that comes along.
Are you suggesting that Grace Kelly then was in love with James Stewart, and then with Cary Grant, and then with, who else was there? Ray Milland and...
Well, I wouldn't particularize on it, because
For obvious
I'm
reasons.
generalizing.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And he's not an army man either.
Who?
Generalizing.
Oh, generalizing, no. Oh. That's... You like all kinds of horror, don't you? Bad puns and...
Not bad pun. Puns are the highest form of literature.